I slid my fork onto the plate, pushed back my chair, and stood up at my son's dinner table in front of his wife, in front of his children, and said the 4 words I never in 72 years of living thought would come out of my mouth: "Then I will leave." The room went so quiet I could hear the candle flame flicker. Ryan's face went pale. Lauren froze mid-bite. And my granddaughter Mia, sweet quiet. Mia looked at me like I had just done the bravest thing she had ever seen in her life. But here's what nobody at that table knew yet. I had already packed my bags. Drop a comment below and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story has traveled. And if this touched something in your heart, hit that subscribe button. This channel is for every woman who was told her love wasn't enough unless it came with labor. Let me take you back 3 months before that dinner. Before the silence, before the letter I left on the kitchen table, before I packed a suitcase at 72 years old and walked out of my son's house with my granddaughter beside me. Because none of what happened that Sunday evening makes sense unless you understand what I gave up to be there. And I mean gave up everything. I need you to picture something for me. Picture a white house on a half-acre of land in a small town in Tennessee. A covered porch with a rocking chair that had worn grooves from 20 years of use. A garden in the backyard that I had planted, tended, and talked to the way some people talk to their best friends. Rose bushes along the fence, lavender near the gate. A fig tree I had planted the year my husband Harold passed because I needed something living to take care of. That house was not just a property. It was the life I had rebuilt from the ground up after Harold died, after the grief, after the years of learning who I was when I wasn't somebody's wife. I was Evelyn Marsh, and in that house I knew exactly who that was. I woke up every morning at 6, made coffee, sat in my rocking chair on the porch, and watched the light come over the ridge. Some mornings my neighbor Doris would walk her spaniel past the fence and we'd wave. On Thursdays I went to the library. On Sundays I called my grandchildren. On weekday evenings I painted watercolors, mostly landscapes and birds, and the way afternoon light hits a field of goldenrod in late September. I wasn't lonely. I want to be very clear about that. People assume a woman living alone must be lonely. I was not lonely. I was free. I was 71 years old, and I had finally figured out how to live a life that was entirely beautifully mine. And then my phone rang. It was a Tuesday night in March, late, almost 9 o'clock. I remember because I had just turned off the porch light and was washing my coffee cup when the phone buzzed on the counter. I looked at the screen. Ryan, my son. I picked up immediately. Mothers always do. Mom. His voice was different, tight, like something was wound too hard inside his chest. Ryan, what's wrong? Mom, He stopped. I heard him exhale slowly. Then, I need you. 3 words. That's all it took. 3 words from my son's mouth, and every other thought I had disappeared. Tell me what's happening, I said. I had already sat down. He told me Lauren was overwhelmed. He told me their 3 kids, 8-year-old twins Lucas and Oliver, and 13-year-old Mia, were struggling because both he and Lauren had demanding travel schedules for work. He told me the last nanny had quit suddenly. He told me things were falling apart and he didn't know what to do. Mom, I need someone the kids can trust. Someone who loves them. You're the only person I can think of. How long? I asked. Temporary, he said immediately. Just until we get organized. A few months maybe. Just until we find a solution. I looked around my kitchen. At the fig tree I could see through the window. At the watercolor I had taped to the refrigerator, still wet, still drying. You want me to move in with you? I know it's a lot to ask, I know. But Mom, the kids need you. I need you. Please. I want to tell you that I thought about it carefully. I want to tell you I weighed the decision with the wisdom of a 71-year-old woman who had survived grief and learned to protect herself. But the truth is, I said yes before I even hung up the phone, because he was my son. And when your child says, I need you, your whole body responds before your brain catches up. What happened next happened fast. Ryan's home was in Atlanta, a large modern house in a quiet suburb, nice neighborhood, good schools. Everything about it looked like success. Mom, you don't need to keep that old house, Ryan told me 2 weeks later when I had driven down for a weekend to see how things felt. Think about the money. You could sell it. Put the money somewhere safe. You'd have everything you need here with us. I sat in his living room and looked at his face, my son's face, a face I had memorized when he was 3 hours old, and I thought, he's right. What am I holding on to a house for? My grandchildren are here. My son is here. You'd have your own room, Lauren added, coming in from the kitchen. She had brought me tea. She was smiling. We'd make it really comfortable for you, Evelyn. It would feel like home. It took me 6 weeks. 6 weeks to sell the house Harold and I had bought together. 6 weeks to box up 20 years of a life. I gave my rocking chair to Doris. I gave Harold's old radio to the church thrift store. I kept 2 suitcases and a box of painting supplies. The fig tree I could not take. I left it in the backyard. I don't know why, but that was the hardest part. Standing in the backyard on the last morning looking at that tree, Harold never got to see, grow to full height and saying goodbye to it like it was a person. Then I locked the door, handed the keys to the realtor, and drove to Atlanta. When I arrived at Ryan's house, he came out to the driveway before I had even gotten out of the car. "Mom." He hugged me hard. He smelled like the same cologne he'd worn since college. "I'm so glad you're here. The kids are losing their minds. They're so excited." Lucas and Oliver burst through the front door in their socks. Grandma's here." They collided with my legs. I held their heads in my hands. 8 years old, all elbows and noise and pure, uncomplicated love. "My boys," I said, and I meant it with everything I had. Mia appeared in the doorway, quieter. She was 13 and already had the careful eyes of someone who watches more than she speaks. She gave me a real hug, though the kind that lasts a second longer than it needs to. "Hi, Grandma," she said into my shoulder. "Hi, baby." Lauren stood behind Ryan, smiling. "We're so glad you're here, Evelyn. Really, this is going to be so good for all of us." That night, Ryan made a toast at dinner. "To family," he said. He looked at me. "To Mom, who always shows up when it matters." I raised my glass. I felt warm. I felt needed. I felt like I had made exactly the right decision. I want you to hold that image. Hold it, because what came next, and it didn't take long, was going to take that warmth and very slowly, very deliberately drain every last drop of it from me. The first 2 weeks I told myself, this is just an adjustment period. I was cooking breakfast by 7 every morning. The twins needed lunches packed. Mia had a project due for school that she needed help organizing. Ryan left early. Lauren had calls. The house didn't clean itself, so I cleaned it. "Mom, you don't have to do that," Ryan said once, walking through the kitchen while I was scrubbing the stovetop. "I don't mind," I told him, and I didn't. Not then. The problem wasn't the work. I have never been afraid of work. The problem was that by week 3, nobody said you don't have to do that anymore. The work was simply expected, assumed, built into the daily architecture of the household, as if I were a fixed feature, like the dishwasher, like the thermostat, a thing that functioned reliably and required no acknowledgement. Ryan and Lauren started taking trips. The first one was a weekend in Charlotte. "Work thing," Ryan said. "Quick there and back." I stayed with the kids. Fine. Of course. That's what I was there for. Then it was 3 days in Dallas, then 4 days in Miami, then a long weekend that turned into a full week in San Francisco. Each trip came with a wave goodbye and a list of instructions left on the kitchen counter. Lucas needs his inhaler if the pollen count is high. Oliver has soccer practice Tuesday at 4. Mia's dentist appointment is Thursday morning. She knows the address. No thank you, Mom. No we owe you. No how are you doing with all of this, just instructions. And I followed them, because that is what I had always done. I had spent 50 years making sure everyone around me had what they needed. It was muscle memory. It was identity. But something in me was starting to grow very, very quiet. "Grandma, are you tired?" It was Mia. She had come into the kitchen late one evening while I was finishing the dishes the 3rd time that day. I'd cleaned that kitchen, and she was watching me with those careful eyes of hers. "A little," I admitted. "You're always tired." She sat on the stool at the counter. "You never sit down." I sit down. "When?" I thought about it. "After everyone goes to bed." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Does it bother you when they just leave?" "Your parents work hard," I said, automatically, the way mothers answer when they're protecting their children from a truth that isn't ready to be named yet. Mia looked at me. She didn't say anything, but the way she looked at me told me she already knew the truth had a name. She just wasn't going to be the one to say it first. That night, after the kids were in bed, I sat in the small chair in the corner of my room, the room that was mine, though it sometimes held Ryan's boxes and Lauren's off-season clothes, and I tried to remember the last time I had painted. I couldn't remember. I couldn't remember the last morning I had woken up and had coffee in silence without thinking about lunches or laundry or what time someone needed to be picked up. I lay in bed that night, and I thought about the fig tree. And for the first time since I'd left Tennessee, I let myself feel something I had been carefully setting aside for weeks. I felt the particular heavy ache of a woman who had given away her entire life on the promise of being needed. And I was starting to understand slowly, painfully, like waking up from anesthesia, that being needed and being valued are not the same thing. The Sunday that changed everything was ordinary in the way that the most life-altering moments always are. Nothing announced it. Nothing gave me a warning. I had spent 4 hours on that roast chicken. I want you to understand what 4 hours means when you're 71. It means my back aches by the third hour. It means I'm careful about how I stand. It means I poured everything I had into that meal because cooking had always been my way of expressing love when I didn't know how to say it out loud. The table was set. The food was hot. The twins were being twins, loud and joyful and demanding in the way that 8-year-olds are. And Mia had her homework spread at one end of the table, working quietly the way she always did. Ryan poured himself a drink and sat at the head of the table. Lauren sat across from me. It looked on the surface exactly like a family dinner. And then Ryan put his glass down with a small, decisive clink. He looked at me. "Mom, I've been thinking. I want to talk to you about something." I looked up from serving myself. Lauren and I have a lot of travel coming up this quarter, a lot more than we expected, and I think we need to formalize things a little bit. "Formalize," I repeated. "Yeah." He leaned back, casual, easy, the way he looked when he was about to say something he'd already decided and didn't expect to be challenged on. "You're here. The kids need someone. It makes sense for you to be that person full-time while we do what we need to do for work." "Full-time," I said. "It's not that different from what you're already doing." He picked up his fork. "We're not asking for anything extra. Just look, let's make things simple. You stay watch the kids while Lauren and I travel. That's your role now, your purpose here." I put my fork down. I'm not sure he even noticed. "Your role," I said. I kept my voice very calm. "That's the word you're choosing." "Mom," he sighed, the sigh of a man explaining something obvious to someone slower. "You're their grandmother. You should want to help. This is what grandparents do." "And if I have thoughts about the arrangement?" I asked. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes was not cruelty exactly. It was something worse. It was indifference dressed up as authority. "Mom." He said my name like it was a full stop, like it was the end of a paragraph. "If you don't like it, you know where the door is." The table went completely, absolutely still. Lucas looked at Oliver. Oliver looked at his plate. Mia's pencil stopped moving. Lauren kept eating. She did not look up. She did not say, "Ryan, that's enough." She did not say, "Evelyn, I'm sorry." She just ate her roast chicken, the chicken I had spent 4 hours making, and said absolutely nothing. And that silence from Lauren told me something I had not quite let myself fully believe until that exact moment. This was not Ryan acting impulsively. This was not one difficult moment in an otherwise loving relationship. This was agreed upon. This had been discussed. This was a plan. I want to tell you what happened in my body in that moment, because I think it matters. I did not cry. I expected to cry, and I did not. What I felt was something I can only describe as a kind of terrifying clarity. Like a fog I had been living inside for 3 months, suddenly thinned all at once completely, and I could see the entire landscape of the last 3 months with absolute precision. Every morning I had woken up before sunrise, for them. Every meal I had cooked, every load of laundry, every school pickup, every permission slip signed, every bedtime story read, every nightmare soothed at 2 a.m. For them. The house I had sold, the garden I had left, the fig tree, the rocking chair, the mornings I never got to drink my coffee in peace, the paintings I never got to finish. For them. And my son, sitting at the head of the table at the dinner table I had just cooked for in the house. I had rearranged my entire existence to be present in my son, had just told me that if I didn't like being used, I could leave. The woman I was 6 months ago would have swallowed it. She would have said, "I'm sorry, Ryan, I didn't mean to make it complicated." She would have cleared the plates and gone to bed and cried into her pillow and convinced herself that this was what love cost and that the price was hers to pay. But something about the way Lauren kept eating the complete practiced absence of reaction had broken something loose in me. Something old, something that had been trapped under decades of giving. And it came up like a breath. I stood up. "You're right, Ryan." He blinked. "I am." "Yes." I folded my napkin, laid it beside my plate. "If my only purpose in this house is to serve you, then it is absolutely time for me to leave." Ryan laughed, a short, startled sound. "Mom, don't be dramatic." "I'm not being dramatic." I looked at him. I kept my voice steady, not hard, not angry, steady. "I'm being honest, for the first time in a long time." "Mom." "I'll need a few days," I said, "to arrange things. I'll let you know my timeline." I picked up my glass of water, took a sip, set it down. Then I walked out of the dining room. Behind me, I heard the twins whispering. I heard Mia's chair scrape back. I heard Ryan say something sharp and low to Lauren. I heard Lauren's voice equally low, and I didn't catch the words. I walked to my room. I sat on the edge of my bed. And in the silence, for the first time in 3 months, I did not ask myself what everyone else needed. I asked myself what I was going to do next. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was upset, or not only because of that. I didn't sleep because my mind was doing something it had not done in a very long time. It was working, it was planning, it was thinking with a kind of sharp, forward-moving clarity that felt almost unfamiliar. Because while Ryan thought he had delivered a warning, he had actually given me something far more useful. He had given me permission. Not to leave. I hadn't needed permission for that. He had given me permission to stop pretending, to stop being the mother who smooths things over and absorbs the damage and goes to bed without complaining and wakes up and does it all again. He had taken the pretense off the table himself, and now I could see everything clearly. I got up at 3 a.m, sat at the small desk in my room, and I started writing down everything I could remember. Every trip Ryan and Lauren had taken and told me was for work. Every financial conversation that had edged too close to the topic of my money and what happens to it. Every comment about how it was so much better for me to be there than to be alone in that house in Tennessee. I wrote it all down because I was starting to understand something that made my chest hurt in a way I wasn't ready to fully name yet. My son had not called me in March because he needed me. He had called me because he had a plan, and I had driven right into it with 2 suitcases and a box of watercolors, wearing my love like an open door that anyone could walk through. That was the night the woman I used to be, the one who believed love meant accepting whatever came with it, began very quietly to disappear. And the woman who would walk out of that house with her head up had not yet arrived, but she was coming. She was already on her way. I want you to understand something about the morning after that dinner. I did not wake up feeling brave. I did not wake up feeling like a woman who had just reclaimed her dignity at the dinner table. I woke up at 5:43 in the morning in that small room that still had 2 of Ryan's storage boxes pushed against the wall, and the first thing I felt was fear. The ordinary, bone-deep fear of a 71-year-old woman who had sold her home 3 months ago and was now lying in a borrowed bed, wondering what on earth she had just set into motion. I lay there for a while, and I let myself feel it. Because I have learned the hard way over many decades that the worst thing you can do with fear is pretend it isn't there. It doesn't go away. It just goes underground, and underground is where it does the most damage. So I felt it. I felt the fear. I felt the uncertainty. I felt the particular cold reality of being a woman in her 70s, who had given away her house, her garden, and 20 years of a carefully built, independent life, all because her son said 4 words on a Tuesday night phone call. And then I got up, because fear may be honest, but it is not a plan. And after that dinner, what I needed more than anything was a plan. I made coffee before anyone else in the house was awake. I stood at the kitchen counter I had scrubbed and organized and restocked for 3 months, and I drank it slowly. I looked at the window. It was still dark outside. The suburb was completely quiet. And I thought, what do I actually know? I knew Ryan had used the word role. I knew Lauren had not defended me. I knew that what happened at that dinner was not an impulsive moment. It was a policy statement. Clear, deliberate, delivered, with the casual authority of a man who expected 0 resistance. I knew something else too, something that had been sitting at the edge of my thinking since the night before, something I had not let myself look at directly yet. I knew that the house money was gone. Not all of it. Not yet. But I had not been keeping close enough track, and there were conversations I had half participated in over the past 3 months. Conversations about consolidating accounts, and it's easier if everything is in one place, and Mom, it's just simpler if we handle the bills from here. And I had nodded and trusted and gone back to folding laundry. I stood there in Ryan's kitchen at 5:45 in the morning, and I felt the fear again. Sharper this time. But underneath the fear, something else had woken up. Something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Anger. An anger in a 71-year-old woman who has spent most of her life being told that her feelings are an inconvenience. Anger is a very, very useful thing. I poured the rest of my coffee down the drain. I went back to my room. I sat at the small desk, and I opened my laptop. The first thing I did was call up my bank's website. The savings account I had built over 30 years of working as a school administrator, the money from Harold's life insurance, the money from the house sale. I had not looked at the full balance in 6 weeks. Ryan had said it was all handled, and I had believed him the way I had been believing him since he was old enough to ask for things. I logged in. I looked at the number on the screen, and then I looked at it again because I thought I had made a mistake. I had not made a mistake. In the 6 weeks since I had given Ryan access to help manage things, $18,400 had left that account. $18,400. I sat very still. My hands were flat on the desk. The screen was bright in the dark room. I went through the transactions one by one. Restaurants, not grocery runs, not household necessities, restaurants. A charge from a resort in Miami. 2 charges from a hotel in San Francisco. Clothing purchases from brands I did not recognize. A recurring charge for something listed only as premium membership that I had never agreed to. I did not close the laptop. I kept reading. The Miami charge was from the same weekend Ryan told me he was at a sales conference. The San Francisco hotel was from the trip where Lauren had told me over a rushed voice message she left while I was doing bedtime with the boys that they had to stay an extra 2 days because of meetings. Meetings. I sat at that desk for a long time. Outside my window, the sky started to go from black to that particular blue-gray that comes before sunrise. A car somewhere on the street started up. The neighborhood was waking, and I was doing something I should have done months ago. I was paying attention. I printed the bank statements on the small printer I kept in my room for crossword puzzle PDFs and grandchildren's artwork. I folded them, put them in the inside pocket of the cardigan I kept hanging on the back of my chair. Then I went and started making breakfast for the children. Because here is the thing nobody tells you about being a woman in a situation like mine. You cannot simply stop. You cannot throw the pan down, walk out the door, and begin your escape immediately. You have children in the house who did nothing wrong. You have a 13-year-old girl who watches everything with those careful eyes and who would absolutely notice if Grandma stopped making pancakes on a Monday morning. So I made the pancakes. I packed the lunches. I got Lucas and Oliver up and into their clothes and reminded Oliver about his soccer cleats and told Lucas his library book was on the counter by the door. I did all of it, with my hands steady and my face calm. And in the back of my mind, behind everything behind the pancakes and the shoe tying and the permission slip for Oliver's field trip, I was thinking hard. Ryan came down at 7:30, dressed in a suit travel bag over his shoulder. He looked at me at the stove like he wasn't sure what mood I was in, like I was a weather pattern he needed to read before committing to a direction. "Mom," he said it carefully. "Morning, Ryan." I handed him a travel mug of coffee, because that is what I did. Every morning, whether he deserved it or not. He took it. He paused. "Listen about last night." "Ryan," I said, and I kept my voice quiet, even completely neutral. "We don't have to do this right now. The boys are going to miss the bus." He looked at me for just a second longer than felt comfortable, like he couldn't tell if my calmness was forgiveness or something else entirely. It was something else entirely. "Okay," he said. "We'll talk tonight." "Of course," I said. He kissed the twins on the tops of their heads. He said goodbye to Mia, who had come down and was eating toast at the counter. He did not look at me again before he went out the door. Lauren came down 10 minutes later, already in heels, already talking into her phone. She walked through the kitchen, paused long enough to take a yogurt from the refrigerator, and said without fully looking at me, "Thanks, Evelyn." And then she was gone too. And just like that, I was alone in the house with 3 children. The ordinary morning, the ordinary arrangement. Except nothing about it was ordinary anymore. Nothing about it had ever been ordinary. I just hadn't let myself see it clearly until now. I drove the boys to school. I came home. Mia had a half day and was still at the kitchen counter working on something for school on her laptop. I poured myself a second cup of coffee and sat across from her. "Mia," I said. She looked up. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." She closed her laptop halfway, the way teenagers do when they're giving you their attention, but leaving themselves an exit. "How long has this been going on? Your parents leaving for these trips?" She looked at me for a moment. She was 13, but there was something in her face that was much older, the particular kind of old that comes from spending years watching adults behave badly and having no power to stop it. "Since February," she said, "before you came." "February." I set my cup down. "So before they called me." "Yeah," she paused. "Grandma, can I ask you something?" "Yes." "Did you want to come here, or did they—" She stopped, started again. "Did they make it sound like you had no choice?" I looked at my granddaughter. At 13 years old, she had just asked me the most precise and important question anyone had asked me since I arrived in that house. "They made it sound," I said slowly, "like they needed me." Mia nodded. She looked down at the table. Her jaw tightened in the way it did when she was working through something she didn't want to say. "They told the boys you came because you wanted to," she said. "But I heard them talking before they called you, in the kitchen, Dad and Lauren." She paused. "I wasn't supposed to hear." My chest tightened. "What did you hear?" She looked up at me, and what I saw in her eyes was not the look of a child telling a story. It was the look of someone who had been carrying something heavy alone for a very long time and was finally putting it down. "They talked about the nanny," she said. "How much she cost. And then Dad said—" She stopped. Her voice went very slightly unsteady, the way voices do when you're trying to be precise about something that hurt you. "Dad said that if Grandma came, they wouldn't need a nanny. And Lauren said, 'Will she do it?' And Dad said, 'She'll do whatever I ask. She always has.'" The kitchen was very quiet. I heard the refrigerator hum. I heard a car pass on the street outside. I heard very faintly Mia breathing. "He always has," I repeated. "I'm sorry, Grandma." Her voice cracked just slightly on the last word. "Don't be sorry," I said. "Don't you ever be sorry for telling me the truth." I reached across the table and took her hand. She let me. She held on. We sat there for a moment without saying anything. And in that silence, I understood two things at the same time. The first thing I understood was that my son had not called me in a moment of desperate need. He had called me because he and his wife had done a cost-benefit analysis, and I was the cheapest option available. The second thing I understood was that Mia had been living in this house for much longer than 3 months, watching things she shouldn't have had to watch, carrying things no 13-year-old should carry. And she had just trusted me with the truth. That meant something. That meant something very significant. "Mia," I said, "is there more anything else you know that you've been holding on to?" She looked at me for a long moment, like she was deciding whether to open a door that couldn't be closed again. Then she pulled her hand back. She reached into the pocket of her hoodie. She took out her phone. "There's something I need to show you," she said. "But Grandma, it's bad, like worse than the nanny thing." "Show me," I said. She put the phone on the table between us and turned the screen toward me. I leaned in, and I began to read. The messages were between Ryan and Lauren, a thread that went back to early February, a full month before Ryan called me on that Tuesday night. I could see the timestamps. I could see exactly what they were discussing and when. The first messages were about money. Specifically, they were about my money. Ryan had typed out a number, the approximate value of my Tennessee house, and underneath it, Lauren had replied, "That's a good cushion. How do we get her comfortable with the idea of selling?" Ryan's response, "I'll tell her we need her. She won't be able to say no. She never can." Lauren, "And after she sells, can we get her to put it somewhere accessible?" Ryan, "We'll say it's for her safety. Estate planning. She trusts me." I read it once, then I read it again. I made myself read every word of every message in that thread, and there were many, and they went on for a long time, and they were very specific, and they were very cold, and by the end of them I understood with absolute clarity what I was looking at. This was not my son being thoughtless. This was not my son being selfish in the ordinary way that busy adults can sometimes be selfish. This was a conversation between two adults who had looked at an elderly woman, at me, at my life, at my savings, at my love for my child, and had calculated calmly and deliberately how to extract the maximum value from all of it. They had planned it the way you plan a project, with timelines and steps and contingencies. One message near the end of the thread from Lauren, dated 3 days before Ryan called me, said, "Don't forget the long game. Once she's comfortable and settled, we start the conversation about the will. She's not going to be able to manage all of that on her own anyway." The long game. My hands were flat on the table. My face was, I think, very still, because I had gone somewhere inside myself that was past the reach of ordinary emotion, past sadness, past anger, into a kind of crystalline factual space where I could see everything clearly and feel almost nothing. I was the long game. I was the cost savings. I was the on-site childcare. I was the savings account with convenient access. I was the woman who always said yes and who could be trusted to absorb whatever was asked of her and keep showing up the next morning to make pancakes. I was their plan. Mia was watching me. I looked up from the phone. "How long have you had this?" I asked. "I saw it by accident 2 weeks ago," she said. "Mom left her phone unlocked on the bathroom counter. I wasn't snooping, I swear. I saw my name in one of the messages and I read it. And then I couldn't stop." "Your name?" "Yeah," she swallowed. "They talked about me too." I waited. "They said I was getting—" She stopped. Started again. "Lauren said I was getting too emotional and high maintenance. She said it would actually be better once you were here because you'd deal with me and they wouldn't have to. And Dad said—" Her voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. "Dad said Mia's going to be a problem either way. Mom will handle it." I looked at my granddaughter, 13 years old, her parents' child, the girl they had dismissed in a text message as a problem to be outsourced to the grandmother they were in the process of manipulating. I have felt many things in my 71 years. I have felt grief. I have felt heartbreak. I have felt the specific devastation of losing someone you loved completely. But sitting in that kitchen looking at Mia's face as she said those words, I felt something that was none of those things. It was sharper than all of them combined. It was the feeling of understanding all at once the full dimensions of a betrayal you had been standing inside of without knowing it. "Mia-ta," I said, and my voice was very quiet. "I need you to do something for me." "What?" "I need you to screenshot all of those messages, every single one, and I need you to send them to my phone." She blinked. "Grandma, can you do that?" She looked at me for a moment, then she picked up her phone and started scrolling. "Yeah," she said, "I can do that." While she did it, I sat and I breathed, and I did not allow myself to spiral into the emotional weight of what I had just learned, because spiral was not something I could afford right now. What I could afford was clarity. What I could afford was forward motion. Mia sent me the screenshots, all 47 of them. I said thank you, and I meant it with my whole heart. She said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm going to take care of it." She said, "Are you going to leave?" I looked at her. I reached out and I touched her face briefly the way I used to touch her cheeks when she was very small and just learning to talk. "I'm going to figure out what needs to happen," I said. "And whatever that is, I promise you, you are part of it. I'm not leaving you out of anything." "Okay." She nodded. Her eyes were bright. "Okay," she said. The day moved on. Mia went back to her schoolwork. I went to my room. The first thing I did was call someone I had not spoken to in almost 2 years. His name was Daniel Whitmore. He had been our family's attorney since long before Harold died. He had helped me through probate, through the estate, through all of the paperwork that follows a death and that nobody ever wants to deal with but has to. He was in his early 60s now, methodical, careful, and completely trustworthy. He picked up on the third ring. "Evelyn." His voice was warm with recognition. "It's been a while. How are you?" "I need your help," I said. I said it without preamble, without apology, without building up to it gently, the way I might have done a year ago. He heard something in my voice. "Tell me what's happening," he said. So I told him, all of it. From the Tuesday night phone call in March, to the house sale, to the bank statements I had printed that morning, to the messages on Mia's phone. I talked for nearly 40 minutes. He interrupted only to ask clarifying questions, and each question he asked was precise and pointed, and told me that he understood exactly what he was hearing. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Evelyn, what you're describing has a name. The pattern you're outlining, the relocation, the isolation from your established life, the access to your finances, the documented planning. This is financial exploitation of an elder. In the state of Georgia, that is not just an ethical violation. It is a criminal one." The word criminal sat in the air between us. "What do I do?" I asked. "First," he said, "you don't warn them. Do not let Ryan or Lauren know that you've seen the messages or reviewed the bank statements. The moment they know you're aware, things will move fast and not in your direction." "Understood." "Second, I need you to collect everything. Every bank record you can access. Every transaction. Dates, amounts, descriptions. Send me copies of those screenshots. Do you have any record of conversations about the house sale texts, emails, anything where Ryan specifically advised you to sell?" I thought. "He called me that first night, but we've texted about it since." "Find those texts, save them, screenshot everything." "Okay." "Evelyn," his voice shifted, became something more careful, more personal. "How are you not legally? How are you?" I thought about that question for a moment. "I'm angry," I said, "but I'm not broken. There's a difference." He said, "Good. Angry is useful. Stay that way." We talked for another 20 minutes about immediate next steps. He was going to contact a colleague in Georgia who specialized in elder financial abuse. I was going to look into what protections existed for the money I still had. He told me not to sign anything, not a single document, not for any reason, until we had spoken again. When I hung up, I sat for a while with my hands in my lap. I looked at the bank statement I had folded into my cardigan pocket that morning. $18,400. I thought about the fig tree in the backyard of a house that no longer belonged to me. I thought about Ryan's voice on that Tuesday night phone call, the way he had said, "I need you," and the way those 3 words had landed in my chest like a key turning in a lock. And I thought about something else, something that had been bothering me since I first read those text messages, something that sat at the edge of everything else and made the whole picture darker. If Mia had seen those messages 2 weeks ago, if she had been carrying that knowledge alone for 2 weeks, that meant she had been watching me every day since then, watching me cook and clean and drive and manage and run this household, watching me being used, watching me and not being able to say anything. What did that do to a 13-year-old? What did it cost her keeping that quiet? I made a decision in that moment that I did not second-guess. Mia was coming with me. Wherever I went next, whatever happened next, I was not leaving that child behind in a house where her own parents had discussed her in a text message like she was a logistical inconvenience. The rest of that week was what I can only describe as the strangest week of my life. Because on the outside, absolutely nothing changed. I kept cooking, I kept cleaning, I kept driving the boys to school, I kept helping with homework, I kept making the beds and folding the laundry and doing everything I had been doing for 3 months, and I did it all with a level of calm that I imagine looked from the outside like acceptance. Ryan came home that Monday evening and said, "Mom, I think we got off on the wrong foot last night. Let's start over." I said, "Of course, Ryan." He looked relieved. He patted my shoulder. He went to pour himself a drink. Lauren said, "Evelyn, thank you for keeping things running. You're amazing." She said it breezy and fast, the way you say something you know you have to say, but aren't really paying attention to. I said, "Of course, Lauren." She went upstairs. I stood in the kitchen alone, and I thought they have no idea. They genuinely believe that last Sunday was a bump in the road that has now been smoothed over. They believe I woke up Monday morning, reoriented myself, and decided to get back in line. That thought was not satisfying in a cruel way. It was clarifying, because their certainty that I would comply, that certainty was based on an image of me that was outdated, a version of me that no longer existed. The woman they thought they were dealing with had been the woman I was 6 months ago. Before Harold died, I used to shrink when things got hard. Before I learned slowly, painfully, at great cost, that shrinking was not grace. Shrinking was just disappearance. That woman was gone. I had started to understand that on Sunday night. I fully understood it now. The Wednesday of that week, Daniel called me back. "I've spoken to my colleague," he said. "A few things you need to know." I went to my room and closed the door. "The financial transfers are recoverable," he said. "In the state of Georgia, if we can demonstrate that the account access was obtained through misrepresentation, which those text messages strongly suggest, we have grounds for a civil claim. And depending on how the DA's office looks at the totality of the evidence, there may be grounds for a criminal referral as well." "What does that mean practically?" I asked. "For right now today, practically," he said, "it means you should not move any money yet because we don't want to create any complication around the existing transactions. But it also means you should not allow any additional access. Has Ryan asked you to sign anything recently?" I thought. He mentioned something about estate planning last week. Casually, he didn't push it. If he brings it up again or puts a document in front of you, you call me immediately and you do not sign anything. For any reason. Whatever he tells you it is. I understand. Evelyn. He paused. Is there somewhere safe you can stay if and when you're ready to leave? I thought about Margaret. She had been my friend for 30 years. We had met at a school conference in 1994 and had somehow stayed close through moves and marriages and grief and all the ordinary distances that life puts between people. She lived in Decatur, 20 minutes from Ryan's house. She had called me 4 times in the past 3 months, and I had answered twice and been distracted both times by children needing things. Yes, I said, I have someone. Reach out to them, Daniel said. Not over text. Call them, face to face if you can. That Thursday, when the boys were at school and Mia had an after-school art program, I drove to Decatur. Margaret opened her door and looked at me for exactly 1 second before she said, "Oh, Evelyn, come in." Just like that. No questions first. Just come in. I sat at her kitchen table and I told her everything. Margaret is the kind of woman who does not interrupt when you talk. She does not make small sounds of sympathy or interject her own experiences. She listens with her whole face completely present, and when you finish, she lets the silence sit for a moment before she speaks. She has always been like that. It is one of the reasons I trust her completely. When I finished, she said, "What do you need from me?" "I need to know." I said that if I need to leave when I leave, I have somewhere to go. She looked at me like the answer was the most obvious thing in the world. "You come here," she said. "You have always been welcome in this house. You know that." "It might not just be me," I said. "Mia. Mia comes too." She didn't even pause. I looked at my friend. I thought about all the years we had known each other, all the things we had each been through, and I thought about how strange it is, how remarkable and strange that sometimes the people who love you most are not the people who share your blood. Sometimes they are the women who open their doors without questions and say, "Come in." "Thank you," I said. She reached across the table and took both my hands in hers. "Don't thank me," she said. "Just be careful, and don't wait too long. I know you. You'll find a reason to wait too long." She was not wrong. She has never been wrong about me. I drove back to Ryan's house. I made dinner. I helped with homework. I moved through the evening with the same steady exterior I had been maintaining all week, and inside I was doing the last of my accounting. Not of money I had done that. I was doing the accounting of everything else. Every memory, every conversation, every moment I had chosen to look away from something I should have looked at directly. It is a painful thing, that kind of accounting, because the question underneath all of it is, how did I let this happen? How did a woman who survived the death of her husband, who rebuilt a life from nothing, who was strong enough and independent enough and clear-eyed enough, how did she walk right into something like this? And the answer, when I finally let myself look at it, was simple. It was the simplest answer in the world, and the most human. He was my son, that's all. How was my son? And when your child reaches for you, every protective instinct you have, every boundary, every wisdom, every hard-won understanding of your own worth, all of it falls away, and there is only the reaching. Ryan had known that. He had used it. And somewhere in the tangle of grief for what that meant for the relationship I thought I had for the son I thought I raised was something I had not expected to find. Relief. Because here is what I understood now, lying in that bed on Thursday night after my visit to Margaret, staring at the ceiling of that small, borrowed room with Ryan's storage boxes against the wall. I understood that I had spent 3 months believing I had made a terrible mistake by coming here. But the mistake wasn't coming. The mistake would have been staying. The mistake would have been finding out what I had found out this week and going back to folding laundry anyway. The mistake would have been spending whatever years I had left, being slowly, quietly, systematically diminished by people who had put my love in a spreadsheet and calculated its return. I was not going to make that mistake. On Friday, Ryan announced over dinner that he and Lauren were leaving Sunday morning for a 5-day trip. "Big client meeting," he said. He said it the way he always said it now, brief, breezy, not quite meeting my eyes. "You've got everything handled right, Mom." I said, "Of course." He smiled. Lauren smiled. The boys cheered about something unrelated. Mia looked at me from across the table, and I looked back at her. In her eyes, I saw it the question she couldn't ask out loud. The "is this the moment?" The "what are we doing?" The "are we doing this?" I gave her the smallest nod. She looked down at her plate. but I saw the corners of her mouth change, just slightly, just barely. Something that in another context, under different circumstances, might almost have been the beginning of something new. Saturday night after the boys were in bed and Ryan and Lauren were upstairs packing, I knocked on Mia's door. She opened it immediately, like she had been expecting me. "Sunday," I said, "after they leave." She looked at me for a moment. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe," I said, "and somewhere that's actually ours." She was quiet for a second. Then, "What about Lucas and Oliver?" I had thought about this, carefully, painfully. "Your parents are their parents," I said. "My leaving doesn't change that. But if things go the way I think they might go, if there are legal proceedings, it's possible a lot is going to change. And through all of it, I will make sure those boys know they are loved. But I cannot take them with me. That would be a different kind of wrong." She nodded slowly. I could see her processing it. "But you'll take me." I looked at my granddaughter, 13 years old, carrying secrets no child should carry, dismissed in a text message by the two people who were supposed to love her most in the world. "You're not luggage, Mia," I said. "I'm not taking you anywhere, but if you want to come with me, if you want to start something different, then yes, we'll figure it out together." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I've been packed since Wednesday." I stared at her. "I heard you on the phone with the lawyer," she said, not unkindly. "The walls in this house aren't that thick." I stood there in the doorway of my granddaughter's room, and I felt for the first time in a very long time something that was not fear or anger or grief or calculation. I felt unexpectedly and completely something that felt like hope. "Okay," I said. "Sunday." "Sunday," she agreed. I went back to my room. I did not sleep, but this time it was not because I was afraid. It was because something was shifting inside me. Something old and heavy and long settled was beginning to move, the way a glacier moves, slow, massive, and entirely unstoppable. Sunday morning came. Ryan and Lauren's suitcases were by the door at 8. Ryan kissed the twins. Lauren hugged Mia, a brief, distracted hug, the kind that costs nothing and gives nothing. Ryan looked at me and said, "Thanks, Mom. Really, you're the best." He said it the way people say things they no longer think about. The way you say, "drive safe," or "have a good one" reflex without content. I said, "Have a safe trip." He picked up his bag. Lauren picked up hers. The door opened. The door closed. And then they were gone. I stood in the entrance hall for a moment. The house was quiet in the way that houses get when the people who control them leave. Lucas came running in from the kitchen. "Grandma, can we have cereal?" "Yes, baby," I said. "Go ahead. I'll be right there." He ran back. Oliver's voice. "Lucas, don't take the Fruit Loops. Those are mine." I heard Mia's door open upstairs. I heard her footsteps on the stairs. She appeared at the top of the landing with a backpack over one shoulder and a look on her face that was equal parts terrified and determined, the exact same look I suspected that was on my own face. She came down the stairs. She stopped in front of me. "Ready," she said. I looked at my granddaughter. I thought about the letter I had already written, folded and left on the kitchen counter, written the night before when the house was quiet, in the careful handwriting I had developed as a schoolteacher and never quite lost. I thought about Daniel Whitmore, who was ready to file the moment I gave him the word. I thought about Margaret's table 20 minutes away with 2 cups of coffee already promised. I thought about the fig tree in Tennessee which I could not take with me, and which had grown, and which was still growing without needing my permission. "Yes," I said, and we walked into the kitchen to give the boys their cereal, and then we began the last piece of preparation before the moment that was going to change everything. But that I realized was already done. The preparation was complete. What was left was simply the doing. And I was, for the first time in a very long time, ready. The boys ate their cereal. Lucas spilled his orange juice, and I cleaned it up without a word. Oliver asked me 3 times if I could take them to the park after lunch, and I said yes each time because I meant it, and because some things needed to stay normal for as long as they could. Mia sat at the far end of the table with her backpack leaning against her chair, drinking her tea, watching me with those careful eyes. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. After the boys finished eating and ran to the living room to turn on their Saturday morning cartoons, she looked at me and said very quietly, "What time?" "After the boys are settled this afternoon," I said, equally quiet. "Around 2. She nodded. She wrapped both hands around her mug. She said, Grandma, are you scared? I thought about that for a moment, the way I had been thinking about everything more carefully since Tuesday, precise, deliberate turning each feeling over before answering. Yes, I said, but scared isn't the same thing as wrong. She looked at me for a second, then gave a small nod like she was filing that away somewhere she could find it later. I cleared the dishes. I washed them by hand. I dried them and put them away in the exact places they belonged, because that is the kind of woman I am. Even walking out of a house, I wash the dishes first. At 9:30 that morning, I called Daniel. He picked up immediately. I'm ready to move, I told him. Ryan and Lauren left an hour ago, 5-day trip. Good, he said. I filed the emergency petition this morning to freeze any further movement of funds from your accounts. The court can act on that as early as Monday. In the meantime, do not under any circumstances move or withdraw anything yourself. We need the paper trail to stay clean. Understood. And the documents I asked you to find, the texts about the house sale. I have them, I said. 17 screenshots. I sent them to your office email Friday night. I was quiet for a beat. Then, Evelyn, I have to tell you what you sent is significant. The specificity of those messages, the timeline, the fact that it's in their own words. This is strong. This is very strong. I stood in the kitchen and let that land. Strong. He said it was strong. I had spent 71 years being afraid that my feelings were too much. My needs were inconvenient. My pain was an overreaction. And here was a lawyer, a careful, precise, methodical man telling me that what I had found, what I had documented, what I had collected while making pancakes and folding laundry and acting like everything was normal, was strong. What's the next step? I asked. I'll contact you Monday, he said. You focus on getting yourself and Mia to a safe location. Once you're out and settled, we move. Okay. Evelyn, he paused. You're doing the right thing. I know that doesn't make it easier. No, I said, but it helps to hear it. I hung up. For a moment, I just stood in that kitchen. I looked at the counter I had scrubbed 100 times. I looked at the coffee maker I had used every single morning. I looked at the little magnetic notepad on the refrigerator where I had written the boys' schedule week after week in my careful school teacher handwriting. Then I went to help Oliver find the television remote he had already managed to lose. The morning passed, the way mornings do when you are holding something enormous inside yourself and have to keep pretending you are not. I played 2 rounds of a card game with the boys. I helped Lucas with a Lego set he had been working on. I sat next to Oliver while he watched his cartoons and let him lean against me the way he always did, heavy and warm with his thumb pressed against his bottom lip, the way he did when he was concentrating. I let myself feel all of it. The love I had for those 2 boys was not complicated. It was not about Ryan or Lauren or plans or manipulation. It was just love, the simple, unreasonable, completely unearned love that flows between grandchildren and grandmothers because of nothing more sophisticated than the fact that they exist and you are there. That love was real. It had always been real, and leaving was going to hurt in ways I hadn't fully reckoned with yet. But staying would hurt worse, not just for me, for all of us. At noon, I made the boys lunch, grilled cheese. Oliver liked his cut on the diagonal. Lucas wanted his cut in squares because the 2 of them disagreed about everything on principle. I cut them both the way they wanted and put their plates in front of them and thought, I want to remember this. I want to hold this small, ordinary moment somewhere it can't be taken away from me. At 1 o'clock, the boys asked to watch a movie. I put one on. They were planted on the couch with their blankets by 1:15. I went upstairs. I knocked on Mia's door. She opened it. Her backpack was zipped and ready on her bed. She had changed into her jacket. The boys are watching a movie, I said. Okay. She looked at me. Do we tell them we're going? I had thought about this, carefully. I had gone back and forth on it a dozen times in the past 2 days. We say goodbye, I said, but not in a way that frightens them. I don't want them to feel abandoned. That's not what this is. She nodded. I went to my room. My own bags had been packed since Friday night. 2 bags, the same 2 I had arrived with 3 months ago. My box of painting supplies. My cardigan with the bank statement still folded in the inside pocket, which I had since moved to my laptop bag, along with everything else I needed. I stood in that room for a moment. Ryan's boxes against the wall. The small desk where I had done all my research in the dark. The narrow bed. The window. I did not feel nostalgia for this room. I had never really been in this room. I had been living in a space that someone else allowed me to occupy, and there is a difference. But I paused anyway, because I am the kind of woman who says goodbye to things, even rooms, even spaces, that weren't really mine. "Goodbye," I said quietly to no one. Then I picked up my bags and I walked out. Mia met me in the hall. She took one of my bags from my hand without asking the way someone does when they're trying to be useful and don't know how else to say it. We went downstairs together. The boys were still on the couch. The movie was about 40 minutes in. Lucas had fallen halfway asleep already the way he always did during afternoon movies, and Oliver was watching with the focused intensity he brought to anything that involved animated explosions. I sat on the edge of the couch between them. Lucas stirred. "Grandma." "Hi, baby." He squinted at me. "You look different." Children. They notice everything. Everything except the things adults want them to notice, and everything adults hope they won't. "Do I?" I said. "Yeah, you look like—" He scrunched his nose, searching for the word. "Like when you're about to do something important." I put my arm around him. I held him against my side. I kissed the top of his head, and I kept my mouth there for a second, his hair soft against my lips, and I breathed. "I'm going to visit a friend for a little while," I said. I kept my voice steady, easy. "Mia's coming with me." Oliver had looked over now. His eyes were sharp. "For how long?" "I'm not sure yet," I said honestly. "But wherever I am, you can always call me. You know that. Grandma always picks up." "Always?" Oliver asked. "Every single time," I said. Lucas pulled back and looked at my face with that unsettling directness children have. "Is it because of what Dad said at dinner?" he asked. The room was very quiet. Oliver sat up straighter. Mia, standing in the doorway, went very still. I looked at Lucas, 8 years old, supposedly absorbed in his Legos, supposedly too young to notice, supposedly not paying attention to adult conversations. He had heard everything. "What did you hear?" I asked gently. He looked down at his blanket, picked at a thread. "Dad said you had a role," he said. "Like you were just for something, like a job." I took his face in my hands. He let me. "Lucas," I said, "you and your brother are the greatest gift I have ever been given, and no matter where I am, nothing changes that. Nothing. Do you understand?" He nodded. His eyes were bright. Oliver said from his side of the couch, voice very careful, "Are you coming back?" And that question, that small, honest, devastating question from an 8-year-old boy, was the hardest moment of the entire day. Harder than the bank statements. Harder than the text messages. Harder than anything Daniel had told me on the phone, because I didn't know the answer, not the full answer, not yet. "I will always be your grandmother," I said. "That doesn't stop. That never stops." It wasn't a lie. It wasn't the whole truth. It was the best I had. Oliver looked at me for a long moment. Then he slid across the couch and put his arms around me from the other side. I held both boys at once. I closed my eyes. Mia had turned away to look at the wall. I could see her shoulders. After a minute, I kissed them both and I stood up. "Watch your movie," I said. "I love you." "Love you, Grandma," they said almost in unison, and turned back to the screen with the resilience that belongs only to children. Mia and I walked out the front door at 2:12 in the afternoon. I put my bags in my car. She put hers in. I got in the driver's seat. She got in the passenger seat. I sat there for a moment with my hands on the wheel. "Okay," she said. "Yes," I said. I started the car. I did not look in the rearview mirror as I pulled out of the driveway. I made the decision not to look deliberately, because I knew if I looked I might see something, a curtain moving, a small face in a window, and I wasn't sure I could keep driving if I did, so I looked forward. I drove. We were 3 blocks from Ryan's house when Mia's phone rang. She looked at the screen. Her face changed. "It's Mom," she said. We both went still. I said, "Don't answer it." She let it ring. It rang 6 times and went to voicemail. Then it rang again immediately. "She never calls twice," Mia said. My hands tightened on the wheel. "Don't answer it." The second call went to voicemail. Then a text appeared on Mia's screen. She angled it toward me at a red light and I read it. It said, "Mia, your grandmother has been very confused lately. We're concerned about her mental state. Please let us know where you are." I stared at that text for a full 3 seconds. Then the light turned to green and I drove. "Confused," Mia said. The single word was loaded with 17 different things. "They know I've seen something," I said. My voice was calm, calmer than I expected. "Or they're guessing. Either way, this is the beginning of what Daniel warned me about. They're going to try to reframe this, try to make me look unstable. Grandma, Mia's voice had an edge of panic in it that she was working to control. What do? We do exactly what we planned, I said. We go to Margaret's, we don't respond, and we call Daniel the moment we get there. She was quiet for a moment. Then, they said you're confused. They're going to tell people that. They're going to tell the boys that. Maybe. I kept my eyes on the road. But confused people don't file legal petitions with documentation. Confused people don't have 47 screenshots and 3 months of bank statements and a lawyer who's already moved to freeze their assets. Another beat of silence. That's true, she said. We drove the rest of the way to Margaret's without speaking. Margaret was at the door before I had even finished parking. She took one look at my face and said nothing, just held the door open wide and stepped aside to let us both through. Inside at her kitchen table was a pot of coffee and 3 cups. I looked at the 3 cups. I had a feeling it was going to be today, she said simply. I sat down. Mia sat down. Margaret poured. And for the first time since Sunday's dinner, for the first time in longer than I could honestly say, I sat at a table in a kitchen and felt something settle in my chest. Something that had been clenched for 3 months or maybe much longer began very slowly to release. I called Daniel from Margaret's kitchen table. Lauren called Mia, I said the moment he picked up. Text said I was confused and they were concerned about my mental state. He was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. Then he said, I expected this. Do not respond to any communication from Ryan or Lauren, not by phone, not by text. Send everything you receive to my office. If they escalate, if they show up, if they involve anyone from local services, if they contact your bank directly, you call me immediately. They might try to get custody of Mia, I said. Mia is 13, he said. In Georgia at 13, a child has significant input into custody decisions. And given what's in those messages about Mia, specifically the problem comment, I would not be worried about that angle. Their own words are working against them. I exhaled. How soon can you move on the financial claim? I asked. The freeze petition was already filed, he said. I'll be in front of a judge Monday morning. I want you to know, Evelyn, I've been doing this for 30 years. The document you found on Ryan's computer. I stopped him. What document? He paused. The planning document. The one you mentioned when you first called me. You said you found a document on his computer, a step-by-step plan about your finances. I went cold. Daniel, I said, I never found a document on Ryan's computer. I found messages on Mia's phone. Bank statements I accessed myself, that's all. Silence. Complete total silence on the line. You're certain, he said. Completely certain. Another pause. Then very carefully, Evelyn, when you first called me last week, you mentioned a document, a formal plan they had written, steps for convincing you to sign over financial control. I thought back to that call. I had been shaken. I had been talking fast. I had been processing things in real time while describing them. I don't think I said I found it, I said slowly. I think I was describing what the messages implied, what the overall plan appeared to be. I may have described it as a document without Daniel. I never had access to Ryan's computer. He breathed out. Okay, he said. Okay, that's important to clarify. What we have is still strong. I want to be absolutely clear on that. But I need to know exactly what you have and what you don't, so that nothing surprises us later. Can you send me a precise list? Everything you physically have in the order you found it. Yes, I said. I'll send it tonight. Good. And Evelyn, going forward, if you remember something new or think you might have been imprecise about anything, tell me immediately. The other side is going to look for inconsistencies. We need our account to be watertight. Understood. When I hung up, Mia was watching me. What happened? She said. A clarification, I said. Nothing that changes anything, but a reminder that I need to be precise. Margaret set a plate of shortbread cookies on the table, the same shortbread she had been making since I met her in 1994, the same recipe every time, and sat down across from us. Tell me what you need to do tonight, she said. I pulled out my laptop. I pulled out the bank statements. I laid the printed pages on her kitchen table and spent the next 2 hours going through everything, organizing it, writing out the timeline that Daniel needed. Mia helped. She had a sharp mind and a precise memory, and she cross-referenced the dates in the text messages with the dates on the bank statements, with a quiet, focused efficiency that made me feel not for the first time that this girl was going to be something extraordinary when the world got out of her way. At 4:30, Ryan called me. I let it go to voicemail. At 4:40, he called again. I let it go to voicemail. At 5 o'clock, a text came through. It said, "Mom, I know you're upset. Let's talk. Whatever you think you know, you have it wrong. Come home and we'll figure this out together." I read it once. I showed it to Daniel's email along with the earlier text to Mia. I did not respond. At 5:15, my phone rang again. Not Ryan this time, a number I didn't recognize. I answered it. Mrs. Marsh, a woman's voice. Professional, clipped. Yes. My name is Patricia Hale. I'm calling on behalf of your son, Ryan Marsh. He's very concerned about your welfare. He's asked me to reach out. I felt the hair on my arms stand up. Who are you? I said. I'm a social worker, she said. We received a call expressing concern about an elderly woman who may be experiencing confusion and has left her residence with a minor. I want to make sure you're safe and that I am completely safe, I said. I am at the home of my friend of 30 years. I am 71 years old. I am in full possession of my faculties, and I have an attorney. His name is Daniel Whitmore, and his number is available through the Georgia State Bar. Silence on the line. If you have genuine concern for my welfare, I continued, you can contact my attorney and he will provide whatever documentation is necessary to confirm that I am safe, competent, and exactly where I choose to be. Goodbye. I hung up. Margaret stared at me. Mia stared at me. I set the phone on the table. My hands were shaking slightly. I noticed it and acknowledged it and kept going. Ryan called a social worker, I said. He's trying to establish that I'm incompetent, that I'm confused, that taking Mia is... I stopped, steadied. He's moving faster than I expected. Mia's voice was tight. Can he do that? Can he actually do that? He can try, I said. But Daniel warned me he might. This is the playbook when someone gets caught. You discredit the person who caught you. Grandma, Mia's voice cracked just slightly. I'm scared. I looked at my granddaughter. And I made a decision, deliberately, consciously, not to minimize what she was feeling, not to say don't be scared or it's going to be fine in that empty, reflexive way, because I had been on the receiving end of too many empty reassurances to believe they helped anyone. I know, I said. This is frightening. What's happening is real and it's hard and it's okay that you're scared. I'm scared too. She looked surprised. But I said, here is what is also true. Your father called a social worker to try to make me look confused. And what the social worker found was a woman who answered the phone in full sentences, cited her attorney by name, and hung up calmly. That is not confusion. That is evidence. Mia stared at me for a second. Then Margaret said very quietly, "She's right, baby." And something in Mia's face shifted. Not all the way she was still scared, the fear was still visible, but the panic receded just enough for her to pick up her tea and take a sip and breathe. I called Daniel immediately and told him about the social worker call. He didn't sound surprised. I'll make contact with them directly first thing tomorrow, he said. This actually helps us more than its part. He made that call within 3 hours of you leaving. That is not the action of the concerned son. That is the action of someone managing a threat. He's not wrong that it's a threat, I said. No, Daniel said. He's not wrong about that at all. That night, Margaret made pasta for dinner. The three of us sat at her table and ate, and for a while we talked about nothing important. Margaret told a story about her neighbor's dog. Mia showed us something on her phone that made Margaret laugh, and I ate my food and felt the strangeness and the relief of being in a room where nothing was required of me, where I did not have to manage anything or smooth anything over or perform contentment I didn't feel. After dinner, Mia went to wash the dishes without being asked. Margaret and I sat at the table with the last of our wine. She's a good one, Margaret said, nodding toward the kitchen. She is, I said, takes after you. I looked at my friend. I'm not sure I deserve that. You do, she said simply. Stop arguing. I smiled. It felt strange on my face the way something feels when you haven't used it in a while. Later. I sat on the edge of the guest bed in Margaret's spare room, a real spare room with no storage boxes against the wall, and I went through everything one more time. Every document, every screenshot, every bank statement. I made the list Daniel asked for, precise, chronological, factual. Each item labeled with the date I found it and the method by which I found it and what it demonstrated. I read it when I was done. It was 12 pages. 12 pages of evidence collected by a 71-year-old woman while making pancakes and driving children to school and folding laundry and acting like nothing was wrong. I thought about the woman who had arrived at Ryan's house 3 months ago with 2 suitcases and a box of watercolors, so grateful to be needed that she had not stopped to ask whether the need was real. And I thought about something Daniel had said in our very first call, something I had turned over many times since what you're describing may be financial exploitation of an elder. I had resisted that word at first. Elder. It sounded like something that happened to other people. People who were frail, people who were already diminished, people who had lost their grip on things. But that was the point, wasn't it? That was exactly the point. The most effective exploitation is the kind that doesn't look like exploitation, the kind that looks like family, the kind that looks like love. Ryan had not come to me with a contract. He had come to me with tears in his voice and the 3 most powerful words in a mother's lexicon, I need you. And the woman who heard those words had packed her life into 2 suitcases and called the realtor the next morning. I sent the 12-page document to Daniel's email at 11:47 that night. I labeled the email, Complete Evidence Inventory, Evelyn Marsh. Then I closed my laptop, and I sat for a while in the quiet of a room that was genuinely mine to be in. Sunday turned into Monday, the way Mondays always do, without fanfare, without warning, just a slow brightening of the window and the sound of Margaret's coffee maker starting downstairs. I was already awake. I had actually slept properly for the first time in weeks, and I woke up clear-headed in a way that felt almost unfamiliar. The particular clarity that comes after a long time of low-grade fog. Mia was still asleep. I could hear her breathing through the thin wall between the guest room and the small study Margaret had put a cot in for her. I went downstairs. Margaret was at the counter. She handed me a cup without asking. We stood together and drank our coffee and listened to the neighborhood wake up. Today's the day, she said. Today is one of several days, I said. But yes, today matters. At 8:15, Daniel called. I'm headed to the courthouse now, he said. I want you to know the judge on this petition is someone I know, careful, fair. This is as good a draw as we could have hoped for. And the social worker situation. I called them last night, left a message with the case officer. I've also sent a letter on firm letterhead documenting your current situation, your legal representation, and my professional assessment of your competence and the voluntary nature of your current arrangement. They'll close that case by end of day, I expect. Good. Now, he said, and his voice changed slightly, became more careful. I need to tell you something. My colleague who specializes in elder financial abuse reviewed everything you sent last night, the 12-page inventory. And she said, and I want to quote her exactly, she said this is one of the cleaner cases she has seen. The documentation is comprehensive, the timeline is clear, and the communications between Ryan and Lauren constitute, in her words, textbook evidence of a coordinated scheme. I stood at Margaret's kitchen counter with my coffee in my hand. Textbook, he said. Textbook evidence. 3 months of pancakes and bank statements and holding my tongue, and I had built a textbook case. What happens next? I asked. The freeze petition gives us a temporary hold on any movement of your funds. Once that's granted, and I expect it will be today, we file the civil claim for recovery. Simultaneously, my colleague is considering whether to refer this to the district attorney's office for a criminal review. That's her call to make, not mine, but I want you to be prepared for the possibility that this becomes criminal rather than just civil. I set my coffee cup down. Criminal. There it was again. Ryan could be charged, I said. Ryan and Lauren potentially. Yes, the kitchen was very quiet. I thought about Ryan at 18 months old, learning to walk, holding my hands on both sides, laughing at himself when he fell, pulling himself back up before I could help him. I thought about Ryan at 7, sick with a fever, his head in my lap on the couch while I read to him. I thought about Ryan at 23, calling me from his first real job to tell me he'd gotten a promotion, and he was so proud of himself, and he wanted me to be proud too. I thought about all of that, and then I thought about a text message that said, "She'll do whatever I ask. She always has." And I said, "Do what you need to do, Daniel." "All right," he said. "I'll call you this afternoon." I stood at Margaret's counter for a long moment after I hung up. Margaret had been at the table, not pretending to do anything other than what she was doing, which was simply being present. "Well," she said. "They're filing today," I said. She nodded. She turned her coffee cup in her hands. "How do you feel?" she said. I thought about it. "Like I've been holding my breath for 3 months," I said, "and I'm finally breathing again." She looked at me steadily. "That's exactly how you should feel." Mia came downstairs at 9, still in her pajamas, hair loose, looking younger than she had the day before, like some pressure had lifted. She sat down at the table. Margaret put a bowl in front of her. "My dad texted me again," Mia said. She said it carefully, the way she always said things she was testing, watching to see how they landed. "What did he say?" I asked. "He said," she picked up her phone, read it out loud. "Mia, whatever Grandma told you, she's not well. Please come home. We love you, and we're worried about you both." She put the phone down. "He's never told me he loves me in a text before. Not once." The three of us sat with that for a moment. "What do you want to do?" I said. She looked at me. "I don't want to go home." "Then you don't go home," I said. "It's that simple. It's exactly that simple." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "He's going to be so angry." "Yes," I said, "he is. And that doesn't scare you." I thought about it. "His anger doesn't have the same power over me that it used to," I said. "That's what changes when you stop needing someone's approval. Their anger just becomes information. It tells you how threatened they feel. That's all." Mia looked at me with those 13-year-old eyes that were so much older than 13. "I want to be like that," she said. "When I grow up, I want to not need anyone's approval." "You're already closer than you think," I said. At 2:17 that Monday afternoon, my phone rang. "Daniel." "The petition was granted," he said. I exhaled. "Your funds are frozen against any further movement as of noon today. Any attempt by Ryan or anyone acting on his behalf to access or transfer your assets will now constitute contempt of court." Noon today. While I had been sitting at Margaret's table drinking coffee and helping Mia organize her schoolwork and trying to remember what it felt like to exist in a space that didn't require constant performance at noon today, a judge had put a legal wall around what remained of what I had built over 50 years of work. "Thank you, Daniel," I said. "We're just getting started," he said. "But this is the foundation. From here we build." I put the phone on the table. Margaret looked at me. "Done," she said. "Beginning," I said. And that was the moment, not the leaving, not the packing, not even the conversation at the dinner table. That was the true beginning. Because leaving is an act of one moment, but fighting for yourself is an act of every moment after. I had left Ryan's house on Sunday afternoon, but I had arrived fully, finally in the way that counts on Monday afternoon at 2:17, when a judge granted a petition filed by a woman who had spent 3 months being told her only purpose was to be useful, and who had quietly, methodically, without anyone realizing it, built a case that was now sitting in a courthouse in the state of Georgia, looking very difficult to argue with. Ryan called at 4 o'clock. This time I picked up. I didn't say anything at first. I just let the line breathe. "Mom." His voice was different. The ease was gone, the breezy authority. What was left was something tighter, something that if I had heard it 6 months ago, I might have mistaken for emotion. "Ryan," I said. "I don't know what's gotten into you," he said. "I don't know what Mia told you or what you think you found, but you need to come home. We can work this out." "There's nothing to work out," I said. "Mom, Ryan." I said his name quietly, the way I used to say it when he was very young and had done something that required my full seriousness. "I know about the messages, all of them. I know what you and Lauren planned before you called me in March. I know about the money. I know about the estate plan you hadn't told me about yet. I know what you said about Mia." Silence. Complete, total silence. When he spoke again, his voice had changed completely. "Who have you been talking to?" "My attorney," I said. "Daniel Whitmore. You might want to call your own." Another silence. "Mom." And now there was something in his voice I had not heard since he was very small, something that sounded almost like fear. "Mom, please, we can fix this." "The account is frozen," I said. "There's a petition on file with the court. The process has started. Whatever you and Lauren need to do from here, I suggest you do it with legal counsel." "You're destroying our family," he said. The accusation landed in my chest. I felt it. I won't pretend I didn't feel it, but I also recognized it for exactly what it was. "Ryan," I said, "I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped pretending it wasn't already broken." I hung up. I set the phone on the table. My hands were steady. Margaret was watching me from across the room. Mia was in the doorway. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Then Mia said very quietly, "Was that bad?" I looked at my granddaughter, at the girl who had been carrying other people's secrets in a house where her own parents discussed her in a text message like a logistical problem. "No," I said. That was honest. She absorbed that, nodded once, and then she sat down at the table, opened her laptop, and went back to her schoolwork, like it was done, like we had crossed something and were now on the other side. And maybe I thought watching her, maybe we had. But there was still a great deal of road ahead, and the easiest part of this journey I already knew was behind us. The week after I hung up on Ryan was the strangest kind of quiet I had ever lived inside. Not peaceful quiet, not the quiet of my Tennessee porch at 6 a.m. with coffee in my hand and the ridge going gold in the early light. This was the quiet of aftermath, the quiet that settles after something large and irreversible has happened and the world hasn't quite caught up to it yet. Ryan didn't call again that Monday. He didn't call Tuesday either, and that silence somehow was louder than anything he had said. I knew what it meant. I had been a mother long enough to know the difference between a man who was reflecting and a man who was regrouping. Ryan was not sitting in his hotel room somewhere feeling remorse. He was sitting with a lawyer. Daniel confirmed it Wednesday morning. "I received a letter yesterday from an attorney representing Ryan and Lauren," he told me. Standard opening move. They're disputing the characterization of the financial transfers and questioning the legal basis of the freeze petition. What does that mean for us? It means they've lawyered up, which I expected. It also means they're taking this seriously, which is exactly what we want. Their attorney's name is Marcus Webb. I know him. He's competent, but he's not a specialist in this area. We have an advantage there. And the criminal referral, your colleague, a pause. "She filed it," Daniel said. 2 days ago. It's now with the district attorney's office. I want to be transparent with you, Evelyn. That process moves slowly. Weeks, possibly months. But the referral is in. The DA's office will review it. I sat with that for a moment. "Okay," I said. "One more thing," Daniel said. "Webb's letter included a request. Ryan wants to meet, in person, before things go further. He's asking for a sit-down, you, him, Lauren, both attorneys present." My stomach moved. Not fear exactly. Something more complicated. The feeling of being handed something with edges. "What do you recommend?" I asked. "I think you should go," he said. "And here is why. In a meeting like this with counsel present on both sides, nothing said can be used against you legally, but everything said by them can be noted and logged. Ryan and Lauren are not based on what I've seen people who are good at controlling themselves under pressure. A meeting is an opportunity." "An opportunity," I repeated. "To see what they're actually afraid of," he said, "and to let them show us." I thought about Ryan's voice on the phone Monday, the way it had shifted when I said the word attorney, the way the easy authority had drained out of it and left something smaller underneath. "Set it up," I said. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 11 in the morning at Daniel's office in Midtown Atlanta, 4 days away. Those 4 days were their own kind of strange. Margaret's house had settled into a rhythm that I was grateful for, and slightly unnerved by grateful because it was calm and real, and mine in a way Ryan's house had never been, and unnerved because calm felt unfamiliar. I kept catching myself waiting for something to need doing, waiting for a voice to call my name and want something, waiting for the weight of someone else's schedule to press down on my morning. It didn't come. Mia was doing her schoolwork remotely. Her school had agreed without much friction at 13 with a clean academic record. Working independently for a week or two was not a crisis. She sat at Margaret's table every morning with her laptop and her headphones and worked with the focused intensity she brought to everything she cared about. One afternoon, I sat across from her while she was drawing something in her sketchbook, something she did to decompress between assignments, and I watched her for a while without saying anything. She looked up. "What?" "Nothing," I said. "Just watching you." She went back to drawing. Then, without looking up, "Are you nervous about Thursday?" "A little," I said. "What do you think he's going to say?" "I thought about it. I think he's going to apologize." She looked up then. "Really?" "Not a real apology," I said. "A strategic one. The kind that sounds like remorse but is actually an offer. He's going to say he's sorry, and then he's going to offer me something money terms, some arrangement that makes this go away quietly." She stared at me. "How do you know that?" "Because that's what people do," I said, "when they're not actually sorry, but they need the problem to stop." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "What are you going to do when he does it?" I looked at my granddaughter. "I'm going to listen," I said, "completely. And then I'm going to let Daniel do his job." Thursday morning, I dressed carefully. Not formally, I was not going to a performance. I wore the gray wool blazer I had bought myself 3 years ago for a library board meeting in Tennessee. The one that made me feel, for reasons I couldn't entirely explain, like a person who could not be moved. I wore it over a dark blouse. I wore the pearl earrings Harold had given me for our 30th anniversary. Margaret drove me. She didn't offer to. She simply appeared at the door at 9:45 with her keys in her hand and said, "I'll drive. You need to be thinking, not navigating." I did not argue. In the car, she said very little. When we pulled up outside Daniel's building, she said, "You know who you are today. Don't let anyone in that room make you forget." I looked at her. "Thank you," I said. "Go," she said. "I'll be here when you come out." Daniel met me in the lobby and walked me up himself. He was in his suit, and he looked calm in the deliberate way that good attorneys always look calm, not because nothing is at stake, but because they have decided that composure is a tool and they are going to use it. "They're already here," he told me in the elevator. "Ryan, Lauren, Marcus, Webb. Ryan looks like he hasn't slept. Lauren looks like she's been coached within an inch of her life." "And you," I said. "I look like a man who filed a successful petition on Monday," he said. We walked into the conference room. Ryan looked up when I came through the door. I want to tell you that seeing him was simple, that it was clean, that I walked in and looked at my son across a conference table and felt nothing but the clear legal clarity of the situation. But that would be a lie. What I felt when I looked at Ryan was grief. A complicated, layered grief that had nothing to do with legal proceedings or frozen accounts or 47 screenshots. It was the grief of looking at someone you made, someone whose first steps you held your breath, for whose fevers you sat up through the night, with whose college graduation you cried at in your second row seat, and seeing someone you don't entirely recognize. Someone who looked back at me across a conference table with his attorney beside him and his wife, not quite meeting my eyes. I sat down. Daniel sat beside me. Across the table, Ryan, Lauren, Marcus Webb, a tall man in his 50s with careful eyes. For a moment, nobody said anything. Then Ryan said, "Mom." Just that. Just my name, like a question. "Ryan," I said. Marcus Webb cleared his throat. "Thank you all for agreeing to meet. I think it's in everyone's interest to resolve this situation as, I want to talk to my mother," Ryan said. Webb stopped, looked at him. "Ryan," Webb said carefully, I know what we discussed." Ryan's voice was tight. "I want a minute." Webb looked at Daniel. Daniel looked at me. I gave a slight nod. "1 minute," Daniel said, "and we keep it in the room." Ryan looked at me. And what I saw on his face was something I had not seen there in a long time. Not since he was much younger. Since before success and money and the particular kind of confidence that can curdle over time into arrogance. He looked like he was scared. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said. There it was, right on schedule. I waited. "I know that doesn't..." He stopped, rubbed the side of his face. "I know that's not enough. I know you're angry, but I need you to understand it wasn't supposed to go this far. I didn't think..." "What didn't you think?" I asked. He looked at me. "I didn't think you'd find out," he said. The conference room was very quiet. I heard Marcus Webb shift in his seat. I heard Lauren exhale once very slightly through her nose. I looked at my son. "You didn't think I'd find out," I said slowly. "Not that you were wrong, not that you crossed a line. You didn't think you'd get caught." "Mom, Ryan," I kept my voice even. "I need you to understand what you just said. You apologized not for what you did. You apologized because you got caught doing it. Those are not the same apology." He stared at me. "The meetings that look like work but are vacations," I said. "The money, the plan to eventually manage my estate. The text message where you told Lauren I would do whatever you asked, because I always had." I watched his face change with each item. "I have all of it." "We can make the money right," Lauren said. It was the first time she had spoken. Her voice was careful, rehearsed. "We can pay back everything and set up a formal agreement going forward that..." "Lauren," Daniel spoke quietly, "I'd encourage you to let your counsel handle the financial terms." Lauren looked at Webb. Webb put a hand up. "Mrs. Marsh," Webb said to me, leaning forward slightly. "We'd like to propose a settlement, full restitution of the funds transferred from your account, 100% plus a reasonable interest calculation. In exchange, we're asking that you withdraw the civil claim and that we jointly request the DA's office close their review." I looked at Webb. I looked at the number he slid across the table on a piece of paper. The number was correct. It was everything $18,400 and then some. I looked at Daniel. Daniel was already looking at me, and I could read in his expression exactly what I had expected. This is their opening offer. It will not be their last. "We'll need time to consider," Daniel said. "Of course," Webb said. "Mom," Ryan's voice again, quieter now. "If this goes criminal, if the DA's office actually pursues this, my career is over. You understand that everything Lauren and I have built." "Ryan," I said. He stopped. "I'm going to ask you a question," I said, "and I want you to be honest with me. Not for the attorneys, not for the record, for me." He looked at me. "Did you ever consider," I said, "what it would do to me when you planned all of this, when you and Lauren sat in your kitchen in February and decided how to use me? Did either of you stop for one single moment and think about what this would do to me?" The silence stretched. Lauren looked at the table. Ryan opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "We thought you'd be happy," he said finally. "We thought I told myself you'd want to help, that it would be good for you to feel needed." Something moved through me, fast and hot and gone before I could fully name it. "Needed," I said. "You were alone in Tennessee," he said. "You were by yourself all the time. We thought, stop." I said it quietly. "Just stop." He stopped. "I was alone," I said. "And I was happy. Those two things can coexist, Ryan. I had a life, a real one, built by my own hands. And I gave it up. I gave up my home and my garden and my peace because you called me and told me you needed me. And what you actually meant was that I was useful." The word landed. I watched it land on him. "That's the difference," I said. "That's the whole difference. Needed means you want the person. Useful means you want what they can do." Ryan's jaw worked. And I did not expect this. I want to be clear that I did not expect this because I had prepared myself for strategic apologies and settlement terms and legal maneuvers. Ryan pressed his hands flat on the table and dropped his head between his arms, and I heard something that I had not heard from my son since he was 9 years old and lost our dog. He cried. Not performance crying, not the kind of crying that is designed to produce an effect. This was something that broke through whatever front he had spent the past week constructing and came out against his will, ugly and real and impossible to argue with. Lauren put her hand on his back. Webb looked at the ceiling. Daniel looked at me. I looked at my son. And God help me, because I am his mother, and mothers are built for certain weaknesses. I felt the old pull, the one that had been pulling me toward him since he was born, the pull that said he's hurting. You fix it. That's your job. But I also heard very clearly in the back of my mind a text message in his own words, "She'll do whatever I ask. She always has." And I sat still. I did not reach for him. I sat still, and I let him cry, and I felt the pull, and I did not follow it, because that pull, that beautiful, terrible, bottomless pull of maternal love, was the exact mechanism that had been used against me. Not just by Ryan, but by my own heart, my own need to be needed, my own willingness to sacrifice everything for the feeling of being essential to someone I loved. That pull was real, and it was also the open door that everyone had been walking through for decades. I was not closing it. You cannot close love, but I was finally standing in front of it. After a moment, Ryan lifted his head. His face was wrecked. He looked older. He looked for the first time in a long time like someone I recognized, not the composed, successful, in-control man who sat at the head of his dinner table, but the boy underneath, the one who was capable of understanding the weight of what he had done. "Mom," he said, "I don't know how to fix this." "No," I said. "You don't. Not right now. And that's okay. Some things take time." "Are you going to—" He couldn't finish it. "I'm going to let the legal process do what it does," I said. "I'm not doing this to destroy you, Ryan. I want you to understand that. I'm doing this because what happened was wrong, and because doing nothing would mean teaching you that it wasn't." He stared at me. "I'm your mother," I said, "and I am still teaching you things." The meeting ended an hour later with no formal agreement reached. Daniel said he'd be in contact with Webb about next steps, and Webb said he'd confer with his clients, and everybody was professionally civil in the way that people are when they are exhausted and have nothing left to perform. In the elevator on the way down, Daniel said, "You did well in there." "Did I?" "Ryan's breakdown was genuine," he said. "In my experience, genuine is always more useful than strategic." "I'm not trying to use it," I said. "I know," he said. "That's what makes you different from them." Margaret was in the parking structure exactly where she said she'd be. I got in the car and sat and said nothing for a minute. She waited. "He cried," I said. She looked at me. "Real," she said. "Real," I said. She was quiet for a moment. How did that feel? I thought about it honestly, the way I had been trying to think about everything honestly for the past week. "Like watching someone I loved wake up about 15 years too late," I said. She put the car in gear. "Yeah," she said. "That sounds right." 3 days after the meeting, Daniel called with news I had not expected. "The DA's office has decided to pursue the criminal review," he said. "Based on the documentation and the pattern of conduct, they believe there's sufficient basis to open a formal investigation." I sat down. "Ryan will be notified today," Daniel said. "This doesn't mean charges have been filed. It means there's an investigation. What happens next depends on what they find." "And the civil case? We proceed regardless of what the DA does. The two tracks are independent." I asked him the question I had been holding for a week. "Daniel, is there any version of this where Ryan doesn't lose everything?" He was quiet for a moment. "If he cooperates fully with the investigation," he said carefully, "if he makes complete restitution and the DA finds no evidence of broader criminal activity beyond what's already documented, there are outcomes that don't end his career or result in prison. But that's his attorney's job to navigate, not mine." "Okay," I said. "Evelyn," he paused, "you've done the right thing. Whatever happens next, you made the right call." I hung up and sat for a long time. Mia found me in the guest room an hour later. She looked at my face and sat on the edge of the bed without asking. "What happened?" "The DA is opening an investigation," I said. She absorbed that. Her face moved through several things at once. "Is Dad going to go to prison?" she said. "I don't know," I said honestly. "It's possible that he doesn't. It depends on choices he makes from here. But it's possible he does." "Yes." She was quiet. "Mia," I said, "whatever happens to your father, whatever the law decides, he is still your father, and he loves you. Even people who make terrible choices can love the people they love. Those two things can both be true at the same time." She looked at me. "Do you still love him?" she asked. "After everything?" I looked at my granddaughter, and I answered her the way I wished someone had answered me when I was 13, and learning that adults were capable of being deeply, disappointingly complicated. "Yes," I said, "I love my son. I will love him until I die. But love is not the same as permission, and loving someone does not mean accepting what they do to you." She sat with that for a long moment. Then she said, "I want to call Lucas and Oliver." "Call them," I said. "They'd love to hear from you." She pulled out her phone. I watched her dial. I watched her face change when the call connected, watched something young and real come back into it. "Hey, doofus," she said, and I could hear Oliver's voice coming through the phone, indignant and delighted. I got up quietly and went to the kitchen. Margaret was at the counter. She looked at me when I came in, read my face the way she always did, and handed me a cup of coffee without a word. I sat down. Outside, a car passed. A dog barked twice and went quiet. The ordinary sounds of an ordinary street going about its ordinary afternoon. I had left Ryan's house 11 days ago. In 11 days, I had filed a legal petition, attended a meeting at a law firm, watched my son cry in a conference room, and learned that a district attorney's office in the state of Georgia was opening a criminal investigation into my own child. 11 days. I sat at Margaret's table and drank my coffee, and let all of it be true, at the same time the way real things are not clean, not simple, not the kind of story that has a hero and a villain and a clear endpoint where everything resolves. Real. Complicated. Mine. In the other room, I could hear Mia laughing at something Oliver had said. That sound, that particular ordinary sound of a 13-year-old girl laughing on the phone with her little brother, was the most important sound in the room. It was the sound of something that had survived. It was the sound of something still intact. "She's going to be okay," Margaret said. I looked up. She wasn't asking. She was telling me. "She is?" I agreed. "And you?" I looked at my friend across the table. 30 years we had known each other. 30 years of real. "Yes," I said. "I meant it. Not because everything was resolved, not because the investigation was closed or the civil case was settled, or Ryan and I had found our way to something that resembled what we used to have. None of that had happened yet. But I was 71 years old, sitting at a table in a kitchen that was genuinely mine to be in, drinking coffee that nobody had asked me to make, listening to my granddaughter laugh. And for the first time in longer than I could say, I was not pretending. I was simply there. 11 days after I left Ryan's house, I found an apartment. It wasn't Margaret who found it, though she tried. It wasn't Daniel, though he had offered to connect me with a real estate contact. It was Mia sitting at Margaret's kitchen table on a Wednesday morning with her laptop and a bowl of cereal going soggy beside her, who said without looking up, "Grandma, there's a one-bedroom in Decatur with a balcony, and it allows plants." I looked up from my coffee. "How much?" she told me. It was manageable. Not comfortable, not the way my Tennessee house had been comfortable, paid off mine in the way that only a fully owned thing can be yours, but manageable. And Daniel had told me 2 days earlier that the first portion of the civil recovery had been agreed to. In principle, Ryan's attorney had come back with a counter that was not quite full restitution, but was close enough that Daniel believed we could reach full restitution within 30 days. 30 days. I could manage 30 days. "Send me the listing," I said. Mia slid the laptop across the table. I looked at it. 1 bedroom, 3rd floor, a balcony that ran the width of the living room. The listing photo showed it empty, which was both a limitation of the photography and, I realized as I looked at it, a kind of invitation. An empty space is a space that hasn't been decided yet, a space that's waiting to find out what it's going to be. "I want to see it today," I said. Mia looked up. "Really? Why wait?" She stared at me for a second. Then she smiled, a real one, quick and unguarded the way her smiles always were when they were genuine. "I'll call them," she said. We saw the apartment that afternoon. The building manager was a small, efficient woman named Carol, who showed us around in 12 minutes flat and answered every question I had about the lease without hesitation. The balcony was bigger than it looked in the photos. I stood on it for a moment and felt the air and thought about lavender, about fig trees, about the particular quality of morning light when you have somewhere to stand and receive it. "I'll take it," I said. Carol looked mildly surprised. "Don't you want to think about it?" "I've been thinking about things for 71 years, I said. "I know what I want when I see it." Mia, standing behind Carol, pressed her lips together to keep from laughing. I signed the lease that Friday. Moving in was the strangest thing. I had 2 bags and a box of painting supplies, the same 2 bags I had carried into Ryan's house in March, the same box I had carried out again 3 months later. Margaret lent me a folding table and 2 chairs and a set of sheets she said she'd been meaning to get rid of for years. A woman from her church heard about my situation and brought over a lamp and a small bookshelf without being asked, just appeared at the door with them one Saturday morning and said, "I heard you needed a start," and left before I could thank her properly. That is the thing about starting over that nobody prepares you for. People show up. Not all people, not the ones you might have expected, but people show up. And when you have been living inside a situation where you gave and gave and gave and almost nothing came back, the experience of receiving, of having someone hand you a lamp and mean nothing by it, except goodwill does something to you that is hard to describe. It cracks something open, something that had calcified without your realizing it. Mia helped me unpack on the first Saturday. She arranged my painting supplies on the bookshelf the woman from the church had brought. She put my 2 framed photographs, one of Harold and me, at a lake in Vermont the summer before he got sick, and one of all 5 grandchildren from 4 years ago, the last Christmas before everything changed, on the windowsill where the light hit them in the afternoon. She stepped back and looked at what she'd done. "That's it," she said. "That's your home." 2 photographs, a bookshelf of paints, a folding table with 2 chairs. I looked at it and I felt something I had not expected to feel, something that surprised me completely. I felt rich, not in any measurable sense, in the sense that matters, which is the sense of having exactly what you need and nothing that is costing you something you can't afford. "Yes," I said, "that's my home." Mia stayed with me for the first 2 weeks. We had agreed with some difficulty and a great deal of conversation, and eventually the involvement of a family mediator that Daniel had recommended on a temporary arrangement that allowed Mia to stay with me while the legal situation was being resolved and while Ryan and Lauren were in the process of, well, being confronted with the consequences of their own decisions. The mediator, a calm woman named Dr. Patricia Osei, met with Ryan separately, with Lauren separately, and with all of us together. Once in a session that was the most uncomfortable 90 minutes I had spent since the conference room at Daniel's office. Ryan was quieter in that session than he had been at the legal meeting, less defended. Dr. Osei had a way of asking questions that made it very difficult to hide behind strategy. At one point, she said to Ryan directly, "What do you think your mother needs from you right now?" Ryan looked at his hands for a long time. Then he said, "An apology that's actually an apology, not an offer." Dr. Osei said, "And can you give her that?" Ryan looked at me across the room, and for the second time in as many weeks, I watched my son struggle with something real, something that couldn't be managed or negotiated around. "I used you," he said. He said it plainly without preamble. "I told myself I was also helping you, getting you out of that house, getting you close to the family, and part of me maybe believed that. But the bigger part knew exactly what we were doing. And I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry in a way that I can't put a number on or make into a settlement." The room was very quiet. Dr. Osei looked at me. I looked at my son. "Here is what I did not do. I did not say it's okay, because it was not okay. Here is what I did not do. I did not say I forgive you. Because forgiveness is not a thing you can manufacture on someone else's timeline, and anyone who has ever been truly hurt knows that a premature forgiveness is just another form of disappearing yourself. What I said was, 'I hear you, Ryan.'" He nodded. "That's enough for now," I said. It wasn't a closing of the door. It wasn't an opening either. It was an acknowledgement that the door existed, that somewhere at some point it could be opened again. Whether it would be, that was a question that belonged to the future, not to a mediator's office on a Thursday afternoon. 3 weeks after I moved into the apartment, the civil settlement was finalized. Full restitution, every dollar, plus the legal costs Daniel had incurred on my behalf. Ryan signed it without contesting the final amount, which Daniel said he took as a meaningful sign. I sat at my folding table in my apartment, and I read the settlement document from the first word to the last. I initialed every page. I signed my name at the bottom, Evelyn Ruth Marsh, in the careful schoolteacher handwriting. I had never quite lost, and I felt the pen in my hand, and I thought, this is what staying looks like. Not staying in Ryan's house, staying in your own life, refusing to let someone else decide what it costs. The criminal investigation was still ongoing. The DA's office had made no decision about charges. Daniel told me that was normal. "These things take time," he said, "and the outcome depends on factors neither of us can fully predict." I told him I understood. I told him I had made peace with the fact that I could not control what happened from here. I could only control what I had done, and what I had done was document the truth and put it in the right hands and let the process work. That was enough. That had to be enough. Some nights it was harder to believe that than others. One night, about a month after I moved in, I couldn't sleep. I got up at 2 a.m, and I sat at the folding table, and I looked at the 2 photographs on the windowsill. Harold at the Vermont lake laughing at something I had said, squinting against the sun. The grandchildren at Christmas, all 5 of them piled on a couch, Lucas making a face, Oliver pulling Mia's hair, the 2 younger cousins I didn't see often enough blinking at the camera. I thought about the fig tree. I had thought about it many times since leaving Tennessee. But that night, I thought about it differently. I thought about the fact that I had planted it in grief in the raw first year after Harold, when I needed something to tend because I couldn't figure out how to tend myself. I had put it in the ground and watered it and worried about it through its first winter and celebrated privately and slightly ridiculously when it put out leaves in the spring, and then I had left it. I had left it in the backyard of a house that no longer belonged to me, and somewhere in Tennessee it was still growing. It did not need my permission. It did not need my presence. It had taken root, and it was doing what living things do when you give them the right conditions. It was continuing. I thought about that for a long time. Then I picked up a brush. I had not painted since before I came to Atlanta. Months. The longest I had gone without painting in 20 years. I had not made a conscious decision to stop. There had simply been no room for it. No time, no space, no quiet of the right kind. But at 2 a.m. in my own apartment with the folding table in the window and nobody requiring anything of me, I picked up a brush. I painted the fig tree. Not precisely, not a botanical illustration. I painted the feeling of the fig tree, the way it looked in late afternoon light in late August, heavy and green and full of the patient work of growing. I painted it from memory, which meant I painted it the way it lived in me, not the way it looked in photographs. I worked until 4:30 in the morning. When I set the brush down, my back ached and my hand was slightly cramped, and the painting was propped against the bookshelf where my paints lived, and it was something, not perfect. Not the work I used to do when I painted every day and my hand knew what it was doing, but honest, real, mine. I went back to bed. I slept. The next morning, Mia came over for breakfast. She did that several times a week. She had started staying with me permanently after the first 2 weeks, which had required more negotiation and another session with Dr. Osei, and a very difficult conversation between Ryan and a family court judge, but which had ultimately been resolved in a way that was, as Daniel put it, the best outcome available given the circumstances. Ryan had not fought it hard, which surprised me until Dr. Osei said quietly that sometimes the people who have done wrong are capable of understanding what they owe, even when understanding it is painful. Mia came in, helped herself to coffee. She had started drinking coffee, which I was not entirely sure I approved of, but had decided not to make a battle, and stopped in the middle of the kitchen. She was looking at the painting. She stood there for a long moment without saying anything. I watched her look at it. I watched her eyes move over it. "Grandma," she said. "Yes, this is the tree." She said it not as a question, but as a recognition. "The one you left in Tennessee." "Yes," I said. She turned and looked at me. "It's beautiful," she said. "Thank you," I said. She looked back at it. "Are you going to keep painting? Every day?" I said. She smiled, turned back to her coffee, sat at the table. "Good," she said. "You should have never stopped." She was right. I should have never stopped. But sometimes you have to stop doing a thing to understand what it means to you. Sometimes you have to lose something temporarily to find out whether you are the kind of person who can choose it again. I was that kind of person. I was finding that out about myself one morning at a time. 6 weeks after I moved into the apartment, Noah called me. Noah was my other grandson, Ryan's middle child, 14 years old, who had been at a friend's house the Sunday I left, and whom I had not spoken to directly since. We had texted, brief things. He was not a big texter, and I had not pushed because I understood that he was a teenager, navigating something that adults twice his age would struggle with, and pushing rarely helps. But he called on a Tuesday evening, and I answered on the first ring. "Grandma." "Noah, hi, sweetheart." "Dad said—" He stopped, started again. "Dad said you left because you didn't love us anymore." My chest tightened. I had prepared for this. Not prepared in the sense that I had written down what to say. You cannot write down what to say to a 14-year-old who has been told his grandmother abandoned the family. You can only be honest in the way that respects both his intelligence and his pain. "Noah," I said, "I want you to listen to me carefully. Will you do that?" "Yeah," he said. His voice was careful, waiting. "I did not leave because I stopped loving you. I did not leave because of you or your brothers or your sister. I left because something was happening in that house that was wrong, and staying would have meant pretending it wasn't. And I am too old and too tired to keep pretending things are fine when they're not." Silence on the line. "What was wrong?" he asked. I thought about how to answer that. "Your dad and I have some things to work through," I said. "Grown-up things, things that are between us. But none of it has anything to do with how much I love you. And I need you to know that I will answer every time you call. Every single time. That doesn't change." He was quiet for a moment. "Dad cried," he said. "Like a lot. For days." "I know. Is that—" He stopped. "Is that good or bad?" "It's real," I said. "And real is usually the beginning of something." Another pause. Then quietly, "Grandma, are you okay? Like actually—" I sat at my folding table with the evening light coming through the window, the painting of the fig tree propped on the bookshelf across the room, Mia's school books spread across the kitchen counter where she had left them that morning. "Yes," I said, "I'm actually okay." "You sound different," he said. "Different how?" He thought about it. "Like yourself, more than before. When you were at our house, you always sounded, I don't know, like you were trying to sound okay. This sounds like you're just actually okay." 14 years old. They hear everything. "Noah," I said, "you're very perceptive." "Mom says it's annoying," he said. "Your mom is wrong," I said. He laughed. A real one, surprised out of him. "Come visit me sometime," I said. "I have a balcony. I'm going to grow lavender." "What's lavender?" "A plant. You'll like it. It smells good and it doesn't require anything from you." "That sounds perfect," he said. We talked for another 20 minutes, about his school, about a game he was playing, about a book his English teacher had assigned that he thought was boring, and I told him to give it 50 more pages before deciding. Normal things. The ordinary texture of a relationship that was still there, still intact underneath everything that had happened. When we hung up, I sat for a while. I thought about what he had said. "You sound like yourself, more than before." I had not known until he said it, how much I needed to hear that. Not the validation of it. I was past the point of needing someone to confirm my choices for me. But the recognition. The simple, clear-eyed recognition from a 14-year-old boy who had no agenda, no strategy, no reason to say anything other than what he honestly perceived. I sounded like myself. I was becoming day by day more fully myself. Not the self I had been before Harold died. That self belonged to a different chapter, a different life, and I had no wish to go backward. But something forward-pointing, something that had learned at considerable cost what it needed and what it would no longer accept. Something that had stood up at a dinner table and said the truest words she had spoken in years, and walked out and kept walking, and had not yet stopped. 2 months after I moved into the apartment, I bought a fig tree, a small one, a young one, in a terracotta pot that was heavy enough that I needed Mia to help me carry it onto the balcony. We set it by the railing where it would get the most light. Mia stood back and looked at it with her head slightly tilted. "You know it won't produce figs for years," she said. "I know. Like multiple years, maybe 4 or 5. "I know that too." She looked at me. "You're planning ahead," she said. "I'm planting ahead," I said. "There's a difference." She looked at the tree, then at me, then back at the tree. "I like that," she said. So did I. This is what I know now on the other side of the hardest year of my life since Harold. I know that love is not the same as permission. I spent too many decades confusing those two things, letting the love I felt for the people around me function as an open door through which anyone could walk and take whatever they needed, and calling that generosity when it was really just fear. Fear of being seen as difficult. Fear of asking for what I needed, fear that without my usefulness, I would not be worth keeping. I know that you can love your child completely and still hold them accountable for what they do. Those two things are not opposites. In fact, I think holding them accountable is one of the purest expressions of love available, because it refuses to treat them as someone too small to be responsible for their own choices. I did not pursue the legal process against Ryan because I stopped loving him. I pursued it because I still did. I know that starting over at 71 is terrifying, and it is also possible, and those two facts can exist simultaneously, and neither one cancels the other. I know that the people who show up for you are not always the ones you expect. They are sometimes a friend of 30 years who opens her door without questions. They are sometimes a woman from a church you've never attended who brings you a lamp because she heard you needed a start. They are sometimes a 13-year-old girl who was packed since Wednesday, waiting for someone to finally say the words she'd been afraid to say herself. I know that a table and 2 chairs and a balcony with morning light is not nothing. It is, in fact, a great deal. I know that grief and clarity can live in the same body at the same time, that you can mourn the relationship you thought you had and still have made the right decision to protect yourself from it, that you can cry for a son who hurt you and still refuse to go back. And I know this: I did not abandon my family. I stopped abandoning myself. And those two things look identical only from the outside. From the inside, they are as different as captivity and flight. Ryan and I are not fixed. We may never be what we were because what we were had fractures in it I hadn't seen. But we are in contact. He calls on Sundays now. The calls are short and careful, the way conversations are when trust has been broken, and both people know it, and are trying to figure out whether what's left is enough to build on. Sometimes I think it might be. Sometimes I'm not sure. I hold both possibilities without forcing either one. The criminal investigation concluded without charges being filed. The DA's office determined that while the conduct was financially exploitative, the voluntary nature of certain transactions, my own willingness to give Ryan account access, my own decision to sell the house, complicated the legal picture enough that a criminal prosecution would be difficult to sustain. Daniel told me this on a Wednesday morning, and I sat with it for a long time. I want to tell you I was at peace with it immediately. I was not. I was angry. I sat with the anger for 3 days, and I let it be what it was. Then I let it go, not because it wasn't valid, but because I understood something. The court of law and the court of consequence are not the same court. And in the court of consequence, Ryan was already serving his sentence. The marriage that had been built in part on the convenience of using me was strained in ways that Lauren and Ryan were now paying to work through with Dr. Osei. The business reputation he had worried about in the conference room had survived, but the image he had of himself, the image of a good son, a good man, someone who had built his life honorably, that image had not survived. He lived now with knowing what he had done, and for a man who had always needed to think well of himself, I suspected that was not a small thing to carry. I was not glad about it, but I was not going to pretend it wasn't happening. Mia is doing well. She is doing more than well. She is doing the particular kind of thriving that happens when you take a young person out of an environment that was slowly shrinking them and put them somewhere with actual room to grow. She started taking art classes at a community center 3 blocks from the apartment. Her teacher told me last month that Mia had a genuine gift and that she should be applying to the arts program at the high school across town. I told Mia that night. She looked at me from across our folding table, the one we had graduated to eating dinner at every night like it was a proper dining room, and she said, "The arts program is competitive, like really competitive." I said, "So apply." She said, "What if I don't get in?" I said, "What if you do?" She looked at me. "That's not how fear works," she said. "No," I said, "but that's how courage works." She applied. She got in. The morning. The acceptance letter arrived in her email. She came running into the kitchen and showed me her phone. And we stood there in the kitchen of my small apartment, my apartment mine, and we held on to each other and laughed in the way you laugh when something good happens that you weren't sure you were allowed to hope for. That was a Thursday morning in November. The lavender I had planted on the balcony had not quite made it through the season. I would try again in spring with a hardier variety, but the fig tree was still there, still small, still patient, still doing the slow, invisible work of taking root in new ground. I went out to check on it after Mia left for school. I put my hand against its thin trunk. I felt the wood under my palm, young and alive and entirely indifferent to the cold, in the way that growing things are when they have found their footing. 4 or 5 years before it produces figs, Mia had said. I was 71 years old. I planned to be there for every one of them. That is the thing I want you to hear if you have listened to this story all the way through. If you are a woman who has been spending yourself on people who aren't spending anything back. If you are someone who has been confusing obligation with love, sacrifice with worth, usefulness with belonging, you are allowed to stop. You are allowed to pack 2 bags and a box of whatever matters to you and walk out of the arrangement that is consuming you, even if it is an arrangement that looks from the outside like family. Even if it is held together by the word love, which is the most powerful word in the English language and the most frequently used to mean something entirely else. You are allowed to be 71 years old and start over. You are allowed to buy a folding table and call it a dining room and mean it. You are allowed to plant a fig tree you won't eat from for years, because planning ahead is not the same as delusion, it is the opposite. It is the clearest possible statement that you intend to be here, that you are not done, that the story is still going and you are still in it, still the main character, still the person whose name is on the lease. I did not save my family by leaving, but I saved myself, and in doing that I saved Mia. And in saving Mia, I gave Lucas and Oliver a grandmother who is real, not a function, not a convenience, not a woman running on empty and pretending she isn't, but a person who knows her own worth and shows up because she chooses to not, because she has been left no other option. That is the gift. That is the only gift that was ever worth giving. I am Evelyn Ruth Marsh. I am 71 years old. I have a balcony with a fig tree on it, and a painting I finished at 4 in the morning, and a granddaughter who got into the arts program, and a friend of 30 years who brings me shortbread and tells me the truth. I am not lonely. I am not invisible. I am not anyone's role. I am for the first time in longer than I can account for exactly who I always was, and I am done apologizing for it.